They're religions that came out of India, two faiths with a massive following around the world, Buddhism and Hinduism. The background of how these religions were born is pretty fascinating. Like I said before, the Middle East, including Palestine, was the birthplace for Judaism and Christianity, and then Christianity split into Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and Protestantism, right? And Islam was born there too. But a whole bunch of religions also came out of India. Just from India alone, we get Hinduism and Buddhism. But there are also others like Sikhism, Jainism, a real variety. Okay, but today we're just going to stick to the afterlife in the mainstream religions, Hinduism and Buddhism. And here's something wild. India is the birthplace of Buddhism, right? But the crazy thing is, only 0.7% of people in India are Buddhist. Right now, 80% of Indians practice Hinduism. 80%. So what's the population of India? As of 2025, it's 1.4639 billion people. It's actually surpassed China, which was at 1.4161 billion. So what's 80% of that? If you do the math, it's over 1.16 billion people. Out of 1.46 billion people in India, about 1.16 billion are Hindus. After that comes Islam and then Christianity. Christians make up 2.3% of the population, but Buddhism is only 0.7%. Still, if you calculate that with 1.4 billion people, it's 9.8 million. So I guess that's still a lot of people. Hinduism is a polytheistic religion, right? There are so many gods. Some have multiple arms and legs. An elephant can be a god. It's incredibly diverse. But Hinduism is a bit tricky to label as a religion in the way we usually think of it. That's why we end up wondering, why the heck does Hinduism have so many gods? I mentioned India has a population of 1.4 billion, right? The population density is insane. It has less land area than China, but a similar population. What happens when you have that many people? Stories, like oral traditions, myths, fairy tales, and religious tales are bound to get transformed massively as they pass from person to person. The same story spreads in all directions, changing a little with each telling. So, you have to see Hinduism less as a single unified religion from the start, and more as a blend of everything that has been passed down. The cultures of countless people in the region of India, the culture of each individual, of each family, and even the culture of the caste system. It's all mixed together. That's why there are so many gods and why different regions worship different deities. The very beginning of Hinduism is linked to the Aryans, the people Hitler mentioned when he was going on about his master race. Well, the Aryans were a real group of people, Indo-Europeans, basically white people. It's believed that these white Aryans originally lived on the Ukrainian plains north of modern-day Turkey and then spread out into Europe and also into India. So a lot of these Aryans ended up settling in northern India, and naturally the original indigenous people of India and these newcomers from Europe started mixing. Now, these Aryans apparently had their own mythology that they believed in. Around 1500 BC, as these Aryans moved into India, their myths mixed with the myths of the indigenous people already living in the subcontinent. This is likely where the concept of an afterlife emerged. The idea of, so when a person dies, they go to the underworld. There's an afterlife. That's why we have to perform rites for our ancestors. It's presumed that this kind of thinking started to form. The thing is, the concept of reincarnation didn't exist back then. But then at some point, this idea of reincarnation suddenly starts appearing in the Indian region. What is reincarnation? It's the idea that souls are reborn over and over. Like in this picture, when a person dies, their soul goes here, then there, in a continuous cycle. If you lived a good life, you're reborn into a better one. If you did bad things, you might be reborn as something like an ant, destined to be stepped on.
We tend to think reincarnation is just a Buddhist thing, right? Nope. It's in Hinduism, too. Even the ancient Greek philosopher Plato believed in reincarnation. I was seriously shocked when I learned this. And you know the famous math guy Pythagoras? The Pythagorean school wasn't just an academic club, it was a religious group. Look at this picture. They're performing a ritual at sunrise. There was a religious cult with Pythagoras as its leader, and these folks also believed in reincarnation. So this idea wasn't just in Buddhism or Hinduism, it existed in ancient Greece too. Then, around the 6th century BC, different sects of Hinduism started popping up all over the place. India is a lot bigger than you might think. As Hinduism spread across these vast regions, new sects formed and splintered off in different areas. But here's the thing. Buddha, or Gautama Siddhartha, was already alive during this time. He also lived in the 6th century BC. This means that Buddhism didn't just appear out of nowhere and declare, "We are Buddhism!" In the beginning, the movement started by Gautama Siddhartha was originally a sect of Hinduism. That's how it started, but later the 6 major schools of Hinduism basically declared, everyone except us is a heretic. So, at that point, from the Hindu perspective, the school of thought created by Gautama Siddhartha, Buddhism, became heresy. And that's when they split off completely. The reason Hinduism is still so complex with so many gods is because there are just so many schools of thought. I mean, early Hinduism dates back to before Christ. So, of course, the stories were different for every person, every region, every village. In the process of trying to compile all these countless stories and reform the religion, they had to label many factions as heretical, and Buddhism was one of them. Of course, Hinduism and Buddhism would have influenced each other. They were in the same region, after all. That's why today their views on the afterlife have a lot of similarities. One of the most famous shared concepts is karma. You know how when someone's going through a tough time, some people might snidely say, "Well, that's your karma." What that means is they believe there's a cause and effect relationship for all the actions you've taken in your life. You did action A, so of course you're getting result B. It's like that. Based on the karma you've accumulated, you can be sent to various afterlives. It's not as simple as dying and going to heaven or hell. Depending on your karma, you could become an ant, a cow, a pig, or be reborn as a human again. Here's something interesting. In Confucianism, people worship ancestor spirits. Japan has tons of shrines too, but generally in places like a church, you don't worship ancestors or perform ancestral rites. Hinduism, however, does worship ancestors. In Hinduism, they believe that when a person dies, their spirit wanders the earth. They're said to become ghosts that are constantly hungry and thirsty, wanting to possess a human body and torment it. So, if the funeral rites aren't performed properly and lavishly for 10 days, that ghost can possess the children and make their lives difficult. They believe that if you don't give them a proper funeral, your own parents will become malevolent spirits. That's why they feel they have to hold a grand 10-day funeral. All right, so the funeral's over. Now what? The deceased apparently goes on a 1-year, 16-hell full-course tour. If you divide 365 days by 16, that's about 22.8 days per hell. They experience each one for about 22.8 days. So for that entire year, the descendants have to keep performing rites. I mean, you'd get hungry on a 16-hell tour, right? The belief is that the descendants must prepare a feast so lavish the table legs might break to help the deceased get through this full-course tour of hell. And supposedly, everyone goes through it. They say that by going through these 16 hells, the soul is finally purified at the end. Once the full-course tour is over, they're purified and are reborn as an ancestor spirit. But that's just the first step up the ladder. Even these ancestor spirits have 3 different levels. After passing through the 16 hells for a year, you become a first-level ancestor spirit, right? You stay at that level until, say, I'm a grandfather and my child dies. Then I finally move up to the next level. When my grandchild dies, I move up again. And when my great-grandchild dies, I'm at the third level, and only then do I finally get to reincarnate. This is the Hindu belief system. But this process is where we find a reason why women in India face such a dangerous situation. India is a country with pretty severe gender discrimination. The reason stems from this. What did I just say? I die, my child dies, my grandchild dies, and my great-grandchild has to die for me to be reincarnated. And throughout this entire process, the ancestral rites must be performed meticulously, and it has to be done by a son. From the time I die until my great-grandchild dies, we're talking about 100 to 200 years, right? The belief is that if my male descendants don't perform all these rites, I can't be reincarnated. That is why the preference for sons is still so strong in India. To understand a country like India, you have to understand its religion, its culture, and the fact that it's hard to control a country with so many people. It's incredibly complex. So you could just simplify it and say, that religion is wrong, so it should be abolished. But if you got rid of the caste system and religion in India, would a better world emerge? It would be absolute chaos. People wouldn't know what to believe in or what to center their lives around, and everything would fall apart. You can't just get rid of it carelessly. It's a really difficult problem. From a Western perspective, you might look at India and think, why don't people there challenge what their elders say? Why do they just listen? But imagine trying to ban a cultural norm like that overnight with a law. You'd have fights breaking out on the morning subway over a young person not being deferential enough, arguments over the manners of sons and daughters-in-law. All sorts of chaos would erupt. Fortunately, in recent times, some Hindu traditions have started to allow daughters or sons-in-law to perform the rites if there are no sons. This also ties into one of the reasons why polygamy persists in India, even though it's legally banned. If the first wife doesn't bear a son, they'll take a second wife. If she doesn't, a third, and even a fourth. It's not as simple as just saying the men want to have multiple women. And here's where another very complicated issue comes into play: the caste system. In Hinduism, as I mentioned, your karma, the sum of your actions in life, determines how you'll be reincarnated. They believe you must accumulate good karma throughout your life to be born into a higher caste, like Brahmin or Kshatriya. So, what's the flip side of that coin? It's those people were born as Sudras because they did terrible, garbage things in their past life. This is why people in India discriminate so harshly against the untouchables and lower castes. The thinking is they were born that way because they did bad things in a past life. As I was researching this, I realized how incredibly complex it is. How do you even begin to unravel this? But without understanding this background, Western countries and the American media just focus on one part. The Indian caste system is a huge problem. Look at what the untouchables have to endure. It's so tragic. They only talk about the symptom. Shouldn't they also talk about why it's happening? What do you all think? I'll cover India's religion and social issues like the caste system as a dedicated topic next time. For today, we'll stick to the afterlife. Okay, next up, the religion that was born in India but is now practiced by only 0.7% of its population, the Buddhist afterlife. Buddhism is seriously complex. Can you see this? There's the 8 hot hells, the 8 cold hells, the anti-hells, the post-hells, and something called the 6 realms of reincarnation. Together it's called samsara. But you know me. I'm the guy who can take this complicated mess and give you the simple, scratch-the-surface version. First, we need to know the history, right? It's a religion founded in India around the 6th century BC by the Buddha, Gautama Siddhartha. As I said, it started as a sect of Hinduism. It was born with a similar vibe, but later Hinduism completely turned its back on it and it became a separate religion. In some countries, the Buddha is also called Sakyamuni. Does anyone know what that means? I just learned this myself. It means the sage of the Shakya clan. It was a surprisingly tribe-specific term. Sakyamuni was originally the son of a king from the Shakya clan. But later, Sakyamuni attains enlightenment and becomes the Buddha. Buddha is Sanskrit for the enlightened one. It means he woke up. Nowadays, the term Buddha doesn't just refer to Gautama Siddhartha. It refers to anyone who has achieved enlightenment in Buddhism. And this is also really ironic. Around the 3rd century BC, a few hundred years after the Buddha's death, Buddhism had spread throughout India and was the dominant religion. But you can't just say Buddhism was the dominant religion. As I mentioned, at the time, Buddhism was more like a school of thought within Hinduism. To be precise, you'd have to say that the current of thought we now call Buddhism, one of the many currents within the broader collection of India's indigenous beliefs and culture known as Hinduism, was the dominant one across India. Since it was widespread in India from around the 3rd century BC, it naturally spread to neighboring regions like modern-day Bangladesh, Myanmar, Nepal, Bhutan, and Thailand, eventually reaching China. But this Buddhism also began to change. During the Gupta Empire, between 300 and 500 AD, the major existing schools of Hinduism began to grow rapidly in India. The Gupta kings decided, we should use the caste system and Hinduism to rule the country, and so they began to support Hinduism more than Buddhism. As a result, Buddhism gradually declined on the Indian subcontinent, becoming a religion that struggled to remain popular. Then, in the 1200s, an Islamic state called the Delhi Sultanate came to rule all of India. By this point, Buddhism had already pretty much faded away on the subcontinent. It had already spread to places like Southeast Asia, China, the Korean Peninsula, and Japan. After the Delhi Sultanate fell, the succeeding Mughal Empire was also an Islamic empire. So, in the end, Buddhism's history only started in India. From the Middle Ages to modern times, it mostly flourished in other regions. The Buddhist view of the afterlife is very unique. Similar to Hinduism, it believes in reincarnation and karma. Depending on your actions during your life, you can go to a good place, a not-so-good place, or hell. But you have to understand this. The ultimate goal in Buddhism is to escape the cycle of reincarnation and disappear entirely. If you achieve Buddha-level enlightenment, you don't even get reborn in a good place, you just vanish from this world, like air. But not many people are going to achieve Buddha-level enlightenment, right? So most people end up in what's called samsara, the cycle of existence. It consists of 3 realms and 6 paths. The hell realm, the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, the asura or demigod realm, the human realm, and the deva or heavenly realm.
This earth we're living on right now is the human realm. When we die here, we go somewhere else. But if you reach Buddha-level enlightenment, you don't even go to the best place, the Deva realm, you just vanish. Otherwise, even if you're born in the Deva realm, you could eventually fall back down to the human realm. They say the Deva realm is the best place in the cycle of reincarnation, but it's not like the Christian heaven. Think of it as a place with almost none of the human desires for money or relationships. It's a world of complete non-possession. Imagine if someone full of greed ended up in the Deva realm by a shipping error. It's a place so peaceful and devoid of desire that even when people greet you, there's no underlying desire to get closer. For those of you listening to this right now and thinking, sounds boring, you're disqualified. You'll never make it. Okay, enough jokes, let's get back to it. Buddhism is broadly divided into 2 major branches, Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. You know those ornate temples in places like Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar? That's Theravada Buddhism. On the other hand, the temples in places like Korea or China are mostly Mahayana Buddhism. And this is where some of our common knowledge about Buddhism needs to be broken down. In early Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism, the goal is for each individual to achieve liberation through practice and vanish completely. But Mahayana Buddhism, which is common in Japan, China, and Korea, is a bit different. Have any of you ever heard a Buddhist teaching that says, achieve enlightenment and disappear? Probably not. In Japan, Korea, and China, the teachings are more focused on things like become a bodhisattva and live diligently with a kind heart. Okay, back to the 6 paths of Buddhism. I mentioned they are the Hell Realm, Hungry Ghost Realm, Animal Realm, Asura Realm, Human Realm, and Deva Realm. The lower the number, the more terrible the place. The Asura Realm is slightly better. The Animal Realm is where you're reborn as an animal. The Hungry Ghost Realm is a hell of constant hunger and thirst. And the Hell Realm is where those who have committed the absolute worst sins go. A YouTuber with a rotten personality like me would probably end up in one of those 3, wouldn't you think? Suddenly, I'm depressed. But you don't go directly to one of these 6 paths right after you die. First, after death, you're said to pass through anti-hells and post-hells before being judged to determine your destination. However, this concept only exists in Mahayana Buddhism. It's a doctrine that was added as Buddhism passed through China and isn't found in Theravada Buddhism or early Buddhism. That's why in Theravada Buddhism, they believe a person goes directly to one of the 6 paths upon death, which is why the funeral process is considered very urgent and important.
Anyway, in Mahayana Buddhism, there are 7 anti-hells and 3 post-hells, making a total of 10 hells. It's presumed this was added under the influence of Confucianism, but it's not certain. Apparently, everyone, no matter what sins they've committed, even good people, must pass through these 10 hells. If you're sinless, you just get a free pass, while those with sins are punished in the corresponding hell. It's not clear how long the punishment lasts. You can just think of it as a sequence of events. Some schools of Theravada Buddhism talk about 5 paths, excluding the Asura realm. Like this, Buddhism has also continuously changed to fit different regions and eras. I said the best of the 6 paths is the Deva realm, right? And the worst is the Hell realm. But here's another shocker. Even within that Deva realm, there are 28 different levels. Even after you escape the human realm, you're still divided into levels. And if you fall into the Hell realm, you experience the 8 hot hells and the 8 cold hells. No matter how low you are on the Deva realm's totem pole, at least you're not in hell, right? Recently, there has been a growing voice of self-reflection within the Buddhist community, suggesting that they should move away from using concepts like reincarnation and hell to attract followers, and instead focus on accumulating good karma as practitioners, which is the true spirit of Buddhism. So, that concludes our series explaining the afterlives in various religions, from Christianity and Islam to Buddhism, Hinduism, and even Judaism. I hope you found it interesting. I'm getting hungry now, so I'm off to grab a bite. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe.